All right, so tonight I get to talk to you about one of my favorite things, which is picture books. So what I want to have you do is reflect back to your childhood. Do you have a book that you remember as your favorite? If you do, raise your hand. Okay, I see some hands up. Think back. Can you imagine in your head what one of the pages looks like? Or what some of the text says, or even the plot line? Yeah? For those of you with hands up? Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, because stories are sticky. And they're sticky for a reason. Children's literature functions to socialize children into societal norms, into cultural values, into showing them who they can be when they grow up. And picture books are particularly sticky because they do it in two forms, both with images and with words. So this quote is from a landmark study done by Lenore Weitzman and her team in 1972. And they looked at children's books. They looked at award-winning children's books. And they wanted to see what messages were being communicated. They looked specifically at gender and sex roles, and what they found out is that there were some pretty important differences. They discovered that in these award-winning children's books, males were more likely to be featured, and they were more likely to be depicted in outdoor public spaces, leading and adventuring. Female characters, on the other hand, were pictured less frequently, and when they were pictured in domestic settings, in private spheres, and roles that related to pleasing and serving. And you may be thinking, hey, that was 1972. Like, that's been a while, right? And we want to know how things have changed. Well, in the years between now and then, which is almost 50, we have researchers like Gooden and Gooden, Hamilton et al., and Clark et al., who researched not only award-winning children's books, but mass market books, the bestsellers. And while there were fluctuations in time, it wasn't linear. So we see some improvement that reflects more of what I think we see in society, but not entirely. And this is kind of dangerous, because if we continue to have these inequities in representation, we risk people internalizing negative stereotypes. And I think if we look out into the world, we can kind of see some evidence of how roles are gendered. And what I mean by this is when we look at, for example, the US Labor Bureau of Statistics, Bureau and Labor of Statistics, you find that women and men are not equally represented in the workforce. And in fact, women show up less, and the percentage is directly related to the age of their children. And women do show up in the workforce, for that percentage that do, they're disproportionately in kind of service occupations. They make up almost 75% of the entire workforce that do health services and primary and secondary education. So they're a very large number of a very small number of occupations. And when we look at leadership or politics, women are even less present in those contexts. So what I wanted to know is if we look at children's books today, will we still see nurturing as a female quality, leadership as a masculine trait, and how are occupations being depicted in these books today? So I got to do a really fun research project. I got to look at award-winning picture books from 2018 into 2022, and I got to not only read them and enjoy them for their beauty and words and characters and plot, but I also plotted and coded all the protagonists for their leadership behaviors and their nurturing behaviors. And if there was any adult featured in the book at all, because remember, adults show us who we can grow up to be, I noted their gender and their occupation. And what do you think I found? Some mental guesses? Well, it turns out females are still depicted in nurturing behaviors more than men, more than any other gender category. And when I compared the ratio of which that happened to previous researchers, it was closer together. So there is evidence of improvement, but there still isn't parity. When I looked at leadership behaviors, males, again, were more frequently depicted in those leadership behaviors. But this, we've seen a lot of growth in. So there was just like a one-book difference between females and males when it came to leadership. And I think that that's a pretty good improvement from previous studies. Now, when I looked at occupations, again, males were more likely to be pictured in an occupation than any other gender category. And the occupations they got to have were much wider in variety. They could be pilots and doctors and teachers and musicians and athletes and lighthouse keepers. But when it came to how women showed up in occupations, they were often still in those traditional roles. So things like education, domestic service, and even entertainment. And I think it's important that we try to figure out what messages we're sending to our kids now. Because what we don't know is the magnitude of this effect. We know that in the short term, these kinds of negative stereotypes or internalized stereotypes can affect self-identity and self-esteem. But what we don't often factor in is that in 10, 15, sometimes 20 years, these same people, these same children, are making decisions about their careers and occupations, choosing who they're going to be in the world. And I think it's imperative that we start to look for more equity in those representations. And there's a researcher, Sao, who has some suggestions for us. Sao says, look for non-sexist books. Look for books that push back on gender discrimination, and books that show genders in equal lights. And I think those are all really good. So go home and buy new books, put them all on your shelves now. But I also want to put a call out there to writers. Write better stories. Write stories where gender doesn't determine how you act. Thank you. But it's also to the publishers, it's to the parents. Think about the stories that you're telling our little people and who they'll get to be in the world. And think back to that story that you reflected on, that you said was your favorite. What did it tell you about who you get to be? And so when people ask me, like, how far have we come when it comes to gender in picture books? I don't think we've come far enough. Thank you.